Well, hi, you beautiful New Zealanders. In today's video, I go over an interview with Richard Prebble following up on his resignation from the Waitangi Tribunal in his New Zealand Herald article. So what's in this video? In this video, I asked Richard the following questions here, and he answers them all. Number one, you were part of the cabinet that allowed the reinvestigation of grievances all the way back to 1840. Do you still stand by that decision? Number two, at any time were you aware that tribal historical grievances had been addressed by full and final settlements in the 1940s? Number three, you were also part of the cabinet that invited Sir Hugh Kāwhuru to translate the treaty from Maori to English. Do you stand by that decision? Number four, when did you become aware that Kāwhuru's redefinition of the words kāwanatanga and RANGATIRATANGA in the footnotes of his translation of Te Tiriti were being used to justify Maori sovereignty aspirations? Number five, when did you first become aware that the Waitangi Tribunal's purpose, which was originally to give a forum for Maori grievances to be raised, could morph into a never-ending series of grievances and claims for compensation? Number six, who do you rate in government as having the leadership capability to tackle this issue head-on? Who would be a good replacement to Luxton if he doesn't step up? Number seven, if the government doesn't show leadership on this, what will it mean for New Zealand's future? Do you see civil war on the cards? Number eight, what can everyday Kiwis do to affect change? And number nine, if he was Prime Minister, what steps would he take to wind back the tribunal's overreach and the end of the gravy train? Now, he answers other questions as well, and I give him other questions, and he does a great job. So, watch. Okay, just before we crack into today's video, let me explain how you can help us. More and more Kiwis are waking up to the fact that New Zealand is in big trouble right now. So how can we turn this country around? The answer is through education. What does that mean? Well, it means exposing more and more people to our videos. It's as simple as that. Just click on the subscribe button on the bottom right hand corner of your screen and you'll be subscribed. What happens then? Well, when you subscribe, YouTube sends our videos out to more Kiwis. That's how it works. Subscribing is free. You'll never be charged anything. It's just that simple. So please do it and then enjoy the rest of the video. Thank you very much for watching. Just by subscribing, you can play a big part in the solution to fixing New Zealand. Well done, you. You were part of the cabinet that allowed reinvestigation of grievances all the way back to 1840. Do you still stand by that decision?
Yes, I do, because there were some grievous breaches of the treaty.
So here, Richard talks about addressing grievances, or we could call it redress. Well, some of the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi include partnership. The treaty established a partnership between the Crown and Maori. Active protection. The Crown has a duty to actively protect Maori interests. And number three, redress. The Crown should remedy past grievances. Well, what about this last principle, principle three? Well, that's now really contested. And I'll tell you why. There is massive contention about the concept of redress too. Some advocate redress and say it's vital. Some say full and final settlements to Maori were reached by 1960 and that from then on there should have not been any more. Others, like Dr. John Robinson, say there should never have been any redress. Now, he just recently published a book, and he says it was Maori who really broke the treaty, and he says this in his latest book. By the way, Dr. John Robinson is probably New Zealand's foremost researcher, and I would say historian. He's absolutely incredible. And he writes in his book, quote, all treaty settlements are based on the Crown having broken the treaty. Since that is not so, i.e., the Crown did not breach the treaty, all such settlements are a fraud. There is no justification for the continued existence of either settlements or the Waitangi Tribunal. And there's the reference. So I recommend everybody get that book and they read that book because he puts an alternative point of view that everybody should be familiar with before we go any further forwards with the Waitangi Tribunal.
They were still causing anguish. One only has to go and talk to various iwi about it. And I think we've made a reasonable fist. You can never completely correct that history, but you can make reparations. And I'm actually quite proud of the fact that we had a go at fixing things. And I think the tribunal itself was a reasonable idea, and in its first 40 years played a constructive role in bringing the two peoples together.
Okay, so what's the possibility that a lot of these claims now are just specious? They're made up, they're false, they're fake, and people have come to see the tribunal as an ATM machine. How would you?
It is a bit of a I've accused the tribe of, I have said that we've got to be careful it doesn't turn into a gravy train. And there are professional lawyers who have made their total living, and a very good living, out of bringing grievance claims, some of which they've actually thought up themselves and then looked for people to sign onto it.
You know what, Richard brings up a really good point here about lawyers in the settlement industry. Quote, and this is a quote from the book Twisting the Treaty, The Tribal Grab for Wealth and Power. It says, the settlements process has created a new and distinct industry. Not only are there more than 120 government workers operating the Waitangi Tribunal and Office of Treaty Settlements, but there is a whole host of other contracted to perform various tasks. Lawyers, researchers, iwi representatives and meeting organisers for the 2008 Tree Lords deal racked up $57 million in fees and expenses in the deal, masterminded by the then Treaty Minister Michael Cullen, which transferred ownership of Central North Island Forest to 9 tribes. Of this, an incredible $20 million went to tribal representatives to meet and negotiate among themselves. Can you believe that? $20 million for 9 tribal representatives to have meetings amongst themselves, to have a chatter about what they were going to do. Part of the $57 million went to lawyers and consultants. Up to $10 million was paid in fees to finalise the deal. We're talking about large amounts of money here. The amounts involved prompted Maori rights lawyer Annette Sykes to say, quote, the brown bureaucracy of the Maori world should be held to accountable for the sort of money the Central North Island deal facilitators earned. We're not talking about money from the Crown here either. This is purely Crown Forestry Rental Trust money, unquote. More proof that treaty claims have become a multi-million-dollar industry for lawyers appeared in the Dominion Post report on the 9th of January 2013, which said that claims generated $79 million in legal fees since 2006. So what they're saying is between 2006 and 2013, $79 million was paid out by taxpayer money for legal fees to do with Maori claims. Unbelievable. Justice Department figures detailed the millions of dollars of taxpayer money paid out each year to help Maori groups seek compensation for alleged historical treaty breaches. Notice they're alleged. Unlike civil or criminal cases, claimants can obtain legal and aid regardless of their financial circumstances. Dame Margaret Baisley's review of legal aid found that of the 75 most expensive cases in the year 2008-2009, 41% were for treaty claims. Now that whole quote comes from Twisting the Treaty, The Tribal Grab for Wealth and Power, Trust Publishing, page 169. It is unbelievable how much money is involved in this. And you know what? Any Maori anywhere can go to any lawyer anywhere and start a claim, and all the legal fees are paid by the government, by us. It's just criminal. And if you want to take a Maori to court for something that they're doing on your property, you have to pay if you're a non-Maori. That's the way it is.
The most notorious one I'm thinking about is a lawyer who went to an old people's home and got a whole lot of elderly Maori to sign a claim.
Incredible.
That's manufactured. That's the sort of thing that happens. If you create a situation with incentives, people will follow them. The purpose of setting up the tribunal and doing these claims was actually to settle them, not to enable even further grievances to occur. When you say they're species, some are. Others, people, doesn't take people very long before they convince themselves of the righteousness of their cause. And I say that as a lawyer. You know, I've been involved in litigation. And I remember the judge saying to me one day, I have so many middle-class people appearing in front of me, Mr. Prebble, who are in every respect of their lives completely honest, but they turn up in this court and they give absolutely contradictory evidence. At the time of the accident, according to them, their car was going 50 kilometres an hour in reverse. And it's a miracle that this accident even occurred.
Right.
And that's just the nature of human beings.
Right, gotcha. Now, were you any time aware that tribal historical grievances had been addressed by full and final settlements in the 1940s? Were you aware of that?
I certainly was. I raised that in Parliament. And those settlements, while they look miserable today, in the 1940s weren't. So the Waikato was settled in the 1940s. Terakatani Sullivan, who was the MP for Southern Maori, he was outraged by the settlements given in the South Island because she said it was an insult to her grandfather, who had been instrumental in getting a full and final settlement for the South Island. So yes, there have been, it's actually not just the 40s, there are some disputes that have been settled 3 times.
Richard keeps on bringing up fantastic points, and so here's another one. Some settlements have been settled three or more times. Well, this is what angers the New Zealand public so much. Settlements are never settlements. They're never full and final. The dictionary defines the word settlement like this: an official agreement intended to resolve a dispute or conflict. So these settlements are never really settlements at all. They're never full and final. They're not resolving anything. They are simply the first, second or third payment in a never-ending series of payments. Because the government has endlessly appeased Maori claimants, they have literally trained them to come back for more. You see, this is like Pavlov's dog. You're training Maori to come back for more and more and more and more, and to see that this pot of money is just never ending and it's always available. Maori say to themselves, bro, this is easy money. All you have to do is ask MPs for more and they cave in and they just give it over and over. They just keep giving. Man, this is easy money. This is what they think. So the government's actually created a monster now that's out of control. And you know, they don't know how to put this monster back in the cage because it's out. Right. So I think this is what is angering the New Zealand public, is they're aware of this and they're seeing that New Zealand is in trouble economically right now. We have this big drain of funding going out, and many of the claims are simply second or third time around, and they always seem to say that it wasn't enough the first time. We need more, and so
and we can say that is a possibility for another generation, that there will be another set of claims, and it will be said that settlements that today appear to us to be huge will in the future appear to be small. But
just so we don't miss anything here, I want to interpret what Richard is saying. He's saying that tribes have been paid 2 to 3 times or more for the same grievance, and this is likely to continue into the future, affecting our children and grandchildren. So who is to blame for this? Well, weak politicians who are scared of Maori and thus keep responding to them with appeasement. That's the problem. It's a tragic situation, really, because the more you appease, the more you feed the monster, and the more you feed the monster, the bigger it gets and the more hungry it gets. And of course, you know, this monster's getting bigger and bigger, and it requires more and more food. And by food, I mean money, appeasement. They keep coming back for more. So the government really is just creating a big rod for its own back, and it has been doing it for 50 years. So what's needed? Well, strong leadership is what's needed. That's what's needed.
Here's another way of looking at it. There are only 2 major historical claims still left to be settled.
So Richard brings up another great point. Richard says there are 2 major claims yet to be settled, and the key word here is major, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute. National Minister Potaka recently came out and said there are 10,000 claims in the pipeline. Now, we don't know how big these claims are, the size of the piece of the land wanted, or the amount of money they are demanding in these claims. But what we do know is that assets and cash are being transferred from Crown ownership to Maori ownership at an alarming rate. Often behind closed doors, they're embedded in settlements, and you wouldn't even know it's going on. Most Kiwis have not woken up to the fact that New Zealand resources are finite, and if we keep on giving and awarding and shelling out, one day all of New Zealand will be owned by Maori. So ironically, according to the documents Mai Tiki Mai and Hei Puapua, this is the plan Maori have for New Zealand. They're gunning for the whole lot. So just watch Potaka with what he says.
Ita Rafiti, Maori Crown Relations Minister, how do you see the current state of Maori Crown relationships?
The Maori Crown Relations portfolio is also responsible for implementing the settlement obligations that are outstanding, and there are over 10,000 of those outstanding. And the Crown's obligations do not stop when a settlement arrangement is concluded. Actually, they continue over time, and that's the promise of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi.
A very important one is Ngapuhi. And of course, the reason it hasn't settled is because Ngapuhi itself continues to argue. But the government's holding firm, and so did the previous government. They've made the offer, and hopefully Ngapuhi will realise that they should have taken it, because here's a positive thing to look at it. Some of the more successful enterprises in New Zealand today have actually come out of the settlements. So, South Island Maori are doing very well. They've used their money well. And while in the Waikato, they blew a bit, but they've come back and they've now using their money well. And if you look at New Zealand as a whole, Northland is suffering the most, partly because Ngapuhi hasn't bitten the bullet and said, right, I will accept.
So just to interpret what Richard's saying, the problem with Ngapuhi is that they can't agree among themselves who will receive the money from a settlement. That's the issue. Recently, they put a proposal to the government saying they wanted $8 billion. Can you believe it? But they couldn't decide on who the money would be paid to, even if it was paid. When and if Ngapuhi finally settle, all the other tribes will receive top-ups, something inserted into settlements by crazy Chris Finlayson. The longer Ngapuhi take to settle, the bigger the top-ups will be for the other tribes. You see, we're just going to bleed eternally from all this. Non-Ngapuhi tribes are rubbing their hands with glee at all this. So what's your solution? What would you do? How would you force Ngapuhi to settle so that we can all move on? I want to know what your thoughts are. Write your comments in the comments section of this video. I'm interested to know your thoughts, really.
The country's largest iwi, the Northland tribe, will be the last to settle historical Treaty of Waitangi grievances. For both the Crown and the iwi, the process has so far proved an uphill battle. Yvonne Tahana explains.
Pakingapa, an ancient Ngapuhi fortress where generations of northern leaders lived, including Hongi Hika.
Oh, it's just a cool feeling. I've never ever had a bad feeling coming up here.
Today, the government getting a bespoke tour of the north.
Oh, it's an honour to have him here.
This area is where Rahiri, Ngapuhi's tupuna, split tribal lands between his two sons, the east and west sides of Ngapuhi. And while that issue was settled simply, the tribe has been grappling with how to settle its treaty settlement for a number of years, and that issue is complex. There are more than 100 hapu, a big urban population who live across the country. Significantly, internal mandate issues scuttled the process in 2018.
We did great harm to ourselves, but now we've had a couple of years to breathe. Now, the thing we pulled apart with our own hands, we have to rebuild.
But at Whitiora Marae, there were moves afoot to change that dynamic.
It is time to move together, and I actually believe that.
Instead of a big block settlement, as other iwi have accomplished, some hope there will be many smaller cultural deals.
Many ministers have come in the past and said this is what's going to be, and that doesn't work. We can't force it. Ultimately, we have to have somebody to settle with.
Ngāti Hene, an 18,000-strong hapu, is aiming to start negotiating next year. Waiharoi Shortland also wants something else.
It's a pride that I want restored in being Ngapuhi.
Others are sorting their mandating strategies now. The minister says he's here to listen, even to matters that will impact his own personal history.
One of my great-great-grandfathers was up from Whangaroa, and there's a bay named after him, and I was told that that's going to be changed. So,
A warm introduction as the first iwi to sign the treaty and the Crown's newest treaty boss take tentative steps. Yvonne Tahana, One News.
Yes, but at the same time, this treaty was signed in 1840, and Maori have had the same opportunities to succeed in those years since 1840 and now, and they haven't. And the reason they've succeeded, some would say, is just because they've been given a lot of money. And if you're given a hell of a lot of money, it's not hard to succeed, because they've given the money to clever Europeans to run their businesses, buy their businesses and run them. And that's a perception. How would you comment on that? Maori have had the opportunity, but they haven't taken it.
Let me put back another view to you, which is not often heard, but it's what do you mean by Maori?
Well,
you see, if you actually look at the income of graduates from New Zealand, Maori graduates earn slightly more than the average. Mm-hmm. So there are some very successful Maori living in Remuera.
Right.
I know Maori who are very successful in business. Known many in my lifetime. So when you read that Maori are failing, that's a generalisation.
Yep.
True that a regrettable number of Maori aren't doing as well at school and university as they should, but it's not true to say that all Maori are failing.
So here's the big question. Why do Maori leaders so-called often, very often, bleat on about Maori being the bottom of the barrel? Why do they do this? Is it to elicit sympathy from their audience and thus extract money from their audience? Or is it to manipulate their audience into joining in with the Maori activist cause? Or is it to break down their audience by making them feel guilty? What are your thoughts on this? Watch, this is an example of what I mean by a so-called Maori leader bleating on about Maori being at the bottom of the barrel. They do it so often.
Why does the government want more co-governance?
One, co-governance has been around for many, many years.
But why does the government want more?
Well, it's been around for many years because it's been really beneficial, particularly in the natural resources area. In terms of why we want more because we want to close the gap in terms of Māori and Pākehā in every area, Jack, in every area in society, whether it's education, employment, in the socioeconomic area, Māori lag behind. In fact, the only area we don't lag behind in is in skin cancer. So in every area of society, we want to try and close the gap.
And that is one of the challenges that I think the government and the tribunal have when they just generally talk in racial terms. That's why I actually agree with the government that when you take health should be on the basis of need, not race.
Right.
And when it's on the basis of need, yep, there's a lot of Maori who are in need.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean to say that a businessman living in Remuera should get priority on the health list just because his great-great-granddaddy is a Maori.
Exactly. No, I agree with you that there are many Maori who are successful, and I would make the generalisation as well and not say all Maori for sure. Willie Jackson has said that Maori are bottom of the negative social indicators everywhere, and it's the government's fault that this is so. Would you agree with that it's the government's fault, or is that just a victim mentality?
No, I don't agree that it's the government's fault. Do I think that the government should be concerned about it? Yes, I do. But again, if you look at other factors like socioeconomic, you will find that there's a number of poor whites in New Zealand who aren't doing well, and nor were their parents or their grandparents. If you look at some other socioeconomic facts, one of them is that, and this will get me into trouble,
go on,
but if you've only got one parent, your chances of success are lower. And that's not to say that there aren't some very dedicated single parents who've done a very good job, but if you aggregate together, like saying all Maori, if you aggregate all people with solo parents, you'll find that their kids don't do so well. And if we then look at the state of the Maori family, it's in real big trouble. And there are some basic things like supporting the family that will do a great deal to help. We also got to say, hey, there's such a thing as personal responsibility, and nothing beats personal responsibility. I don't care what race you are.
So Richard brings up this point of personal responsibility, and I completely concur with him. I agree totally with Richard on this point. In the description of this video, I have written a piece on the absolutely crucial relationship between character and success in life. The title of this piece is, What is the Solution for Maori? Please be sure to read this. Interestingly, this has been out there on the internet for over a year and has been read by thousands, yet not one Maori has contacted me to say, great, let's put this into practice for us Maori, when can we start? Not one. Once again, I'd like to know your thoughts on this piece. Please read it. Moving on to your time in the cabinet, you invited Sir Hugh Kāwhuru to retranslate the treaty from Maori to English. Do you stand by that decision for him to do that?
I don't see any harm in him having asked him to do that. I just make this general point that all languages evolve. So what English words meant in 1840 and what they actually mean today, they've changed. The idea that Maori is a static language would make it the only one in the world. It was actually extremely difficult for Hugh Kāwhuru, though I'm sure he was one of the more knowledgeable people, to be able to do that task. I didn't personally ask him to do it. It must have been someone in the cabinet, but I'm not opposed to the fact that he did it. The point that I would make is that, can I put it, that's a new version. That's all. It's like history. Every generation rewrites history. And at the universities, there's a very big academic incentive to do that, because if you write your thesis saying the version that was written before me is absolutely right, you won't get an MA, you won't get a PhD. You'll only get one by writing a new version. So in my lifetime, what we think, take a subject. I did the First World War. I used to go to Anzac Day. I couldn't work out why New Zealanders were at Turkey, and no one sort of explained it. So I actually took the origins of the First World War as one of my senior subjects, because I'm a history scholar. I'm a Lizzie Rathbone history scholar. And when I was doing it, the argument was that the Kaiser started the war. Now, if you read Origins of the First World War, interestingly enough, most people think it's probably Russian aggression. What we're witnessing in the Ukraine was going on in 1914. Now, the facts haven't changed, just our understanding of it. Exactly the same thing is happening now. We've got a new group of historians. I did New Zealand history. They've looked at the facts of what happened in 1840, and they've come up with another version. But you have to realise it's just a version, and their version's no more valid than others. And most people, most history scholars will say you should really actually go and have a look at contemporary written records. Not ones written later, ones written at the time. And exactly the same as in court. You know, the reason why the constable gets up and says, "Can I read out my notes?" And the judge says, "Were they taken at the time?" And he says, "Yes." Then he's allowed to read them out because they're recognised as accurate. And the notes taken at the time by people who were present contradict what our historians are saying now.
I know.
And they're not just the missionaries. There were French there were Americans. They had no particular reason to be pro-British. And their version of what happened, which they wrote at the time, completely contradicts what is we're now being told happened in 1840.
So Richard, again, makes some good points, and he's definitely not a history heretic. This is what I mean by that. What Richard is saying is that in today's universities, because they're filled with woke, radical, activist lecturers, to pass courses successfully, students also have to be woke and radical too. What does that mean? Well, it means that you have to write and say what you're expected to say. What does that mean? Truth does not matter. What matters is that you follow along with the approved narrative. Fortunately, Richard is not saying this is good. He just says it just is what it is. He says that the only way to find out what the truth is about history is to go back to the original sources, people who were eyewitnesses at the 1840 events and who wrote down what they saw and heard. He says when you do this, the treaty is remarkably clear and easy to understand. So basically Richard's saying let the treaty speak for itself. Later on he goes on to say that there's no need for principles of the treaty because the treaty just speaks for itself. It's clear and unambiguous. Essentially, activists have invented the principles so as to give them a way to make the treaty say what they want it to say, thus avoiding what it does say. That's the truth of the matter. Yes, I know. I wanted to pick you up on that because you said that in your New Zealand Herald article, you said that the treaty is clear, the preamble, Articles 1, 2, and 3, and you gave a very good succinct summary of the treaty, which I agreed with totally. But the activists today, like you say, have a very different interpretation of what happened in 1840 than the people in 1840 had. And I think we should go back to what they actually understood and what was communicated in 1840, not take today's modern interpretations by Te Pāti Maori and the Maori Party and whatever, and the Waitangi Tribunal. I mean, you've said that yourself.
That's the view that I hold. Yeah. I'm perhaps a bit unusual. I've actually negotiated a big contract. I negotiated a $350 million US contract, and I was negotiating it 20 years ago. So what's that? Probably $500 million contract, $500 million. And I was negotiating with people who didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Chinese. We were sitting across the table for 3 weeks, and the interesting thing is that in the Chinese picture language, which they write in, the concepts that are clear in English are very difficult to write in Chinese. So I was in a situation exactly like what happened in 1840. There were concepts in English like sovereignty, property rights, that there were no equivalent in Maori. Now, what happened when I was negotiating, what I found very interesting, because I was watching the translators talk and discuss and explaining what they were saying, was actually the Chinese went to the English text to clarify what it meant in Chinese.
Oh my goodness. Richard makes a huge point here, and I don't want you to miss it. What Richard said was, quote, the Chinese went to the English text to find out what the text said in Chinese. Oh my God, this is a huge point. Why? Well, if you want to know what the Maori version of the treaty says, you go to the final English draft. Doing this will tell you exactly what the treaty in Maori says. That's what he's saying. Fortunately, we actually have the final English draft. It's incredible. So I'll put this draft in the description of this video. Maori activists will not like this because it makes their cry, quote, you need experts in Te Reo to know what the treaty says, an absolute nonsense. You just need the final English draft and you will fully understand the treaty. And that's the truth of the matter. Well done, Richard. Thank you, mate. That's awesome.
Right. And we actually wrote the contract in English and then translated it to the picture text of the Chinese. The idea that in 1840 people didn't discuss what sovereignty meant is nonsense. We know that they did because we have a written record of people getting up and saying, I've been in Australia, I've observed the governor in Australia. If that's sovereignty, I don't want it. So the ones who didn't sign did that, but there were other Maori chiefs there who'd not only been to Australia, a couple of them had actually stayed with the governor in Australia for a few months. The idea they didn't know what sovereignty meant is a modern fiction. But here's another argument. I haven't bothered to put it in my article, but I'll, because when you're writing for the Herald, I've got to do 800 words. There's a legal concept called misunderstood. If you write a contract and both sides misunderstood each other, the contract's a nullity. The famous case is a case where parties met and they agreed to do a shipment on a ship called the Peerless. What they didn't know was the two ships called the Peerless. And one of them meant one ship, one meant the other. And the court said, because you fundamentally didn't understand, there's no contract. Well, in international law, the same principle applies, so there it's called error. Under international law, if two parties sign a contract in error, if they completely misunderstand each other, then the contract's a nullity. Now, if the tribunal is correct, they are saying, just as the New Zealand Supreme Court did 120 years ago, that the treaty's a nullity. I don't accept that. I think that they both understood the treaty. I think it's a good treaty and we should honour it.
Okay, Richard brings up a hugely important point. The guy in the photo there is Henry Williams, and he was the missionary who translated the final English draft of the treaty on the night of the 4th of February into Maori, ready for the next day. At noon the next day, 62 chiefs turned up at the tent, and that treaty, both in English and in Maori, were read to those 62 chiefs, and Henry Williams was the translator. All afternoon on the 5th of February, remember the 5th is the day before the 6th of February when it was actually signed, but all afternoon on Henry Williams, Hobson and his retinue, they discussed in a Q&A session with those chiefs what that treaty actually meant. Then in the evening of the 5th of February, they went up into Titi Marae, this is the 62 chiefs plus Henry Williams plus his son Edward, and they discussed the treaty into the night to make sure they understood it. And this is what Henry Williams says. Henry Williams reported to Bishop Selwyn the instruction of Captain Hobson was not to allow anyone to sign the treaty till he fully understood it, to which instruction I did most strictly attend. That the natives to whom I explained the treaty understood the nature of the same there can be no doubt, and there is the reference. So Maori totally understood Kauanatanga to mean sovereignty, and they knew what sovereignty meant. The English word possession in Article 2 was translated TINO RANGATIRATANGA. It does not mean unqualified exercise of chieftainship, and the English word property in Article 2 is not treasures, it is simply property. Did Maori understand that? Yes, they absolutely did.
Here's a little fact for you may not know.
Go on.
But his great-great-great-grandson has actually been appointed to the tribunal. And it'll be very interesting to know what he's going to decide. He's got wonderful ancestors. One of them's Henry Williams. The other is Hatfield. Hatfield was an early missionary and bishop in New Zealand. And if you read the tribunal's rulings and certainly the evidence given, they are very disparaging of Henry Williams. They question him not only as a translator, but they even question his motives. And I actually think that's despicable. There's no evidence to support that, and plenty of support that Henry Williams did not only did his best, but actually did a good job.
Exactly. Well, you can't become the head of a CMS mission unless you're a guy of integrity and you've got some real honour and real, you're an honest man. You just couldn't have done that. Well, this is Bruce Moon on Henry Williams. Claudia Orange claims that Williams, father and son, were not competent translators, although she did not know that Williams' biographer Hugh Carlton had said that Edward was a scholar in the Maori language without peer, which she dismisses as something of an exaggeration. Well, Bruce Moon says this is speculation, not scholarship, and there's the reference. So Henry Williams and his son Edward were just the best when it came to translations. Just moving on, Richard, when did you become aware that Kawharu's redefinition of words like kawanatanga and rangatiratanga in the footnotes of his translation of Te Tiriti were being used to justify Maori sovereignty aspirations? Were you aware of, when did you become aware of that?
Oh, look, I couldn't give you a date. I mean, I'm aware of that these arguments were going on, but I mean, I retired from Parliament quite a long time ago, nearly 20 years ago. I regarded as an MP, when I was an MP, that I should read tribunal decisions. So I used to read them, and I was critical of some of them. I was critical, for example, that the treaty used, the tribunal used the word Holocaust to describe
Parihaka.
Well, no one actually died at Parihaka.
I know.
But no one died.
I know that.
In the tribunal would call it a Holocaust. To me, that's an insult to the people who did die. And what happened at Parihaka, I'm not defending it, but whatever it wasn't a Holocaust. So I have been critical of previous tribunal readings. I'm just making that to let you know that I used to read them. When I retired from Parliament, I thought one of the things I didn't have to do anymore was read them. So I haven't been reading them for the last 20 years. I was appointed to the tribunal. I was aware that the tribunal was making some pretty radical decisions, but I only really got in and started reading them and checking them against the historical record when I became a member of the tribunal. I've been criticised saying I should have done that before I was appointed. It's taken me 3 months, so I'd have had to say to the minister, hey, wait 3 months while I read them. But what actually triggered my decision to retire was not those decisions. It was the fact that the tribunal sent me a copy of a strategic plan. Now, I'd been on the tribunal 3 months. The tribunal hadn't sent me a copy of that strategic plan. It gave me a few days to comment. I sent them a comment, but then I discovered I wasn't even on the tribunal mailing list. Now, maybe that's just a cock-up, but I then had a look to see, well, who is being consulted? And I discovered all sorts of interesting people had been consulted when I hadn't been, like Jane Kelsey, she thinks that the treaty means that the government can't sign treaties. And then there's Annette Sykes, who's been a prolific litigator. So they've gone to the people who litigate, who've obviously got an interest in the tribunal continuing to be a source of grievance, and asked them their views of what they should do in the next 10 years. But I'm a member of the tribunal, and I hadn't been asked. Now, I'd say I want to put it down to the cock-up theory, but I had to think about that. And then I looked at the strategic plan and said, I just don't want any part of this. This is just a tribunal far from solving grievances. We're now creating them.
Right. That was the big thing that got me in your article. Yeah, this is why I'm fun. This is why I'm having this conversation with you, because there was some really big clangers in there, right? When you realise, when did you I'll ask you this question, when did you first become aware that the Treaty Tribunal's purpose to give a forum for Maori grievances to be raised could morph into a never-ending series of grievances and claims for compensation?
I have to say that the Cabinet thought that was a danger right at the beginning, and there was a debate. There was even a debate in Cabinet that before we pass this, we should in Parliament actually say what the principles are. So there was a significant number of Cabinet ministers who thought that it was important, that it would be a good idea to do that. Now, for a variety of reasons, Geoffrey Palmer wasn't in favour of doing that. That didn't happen. But David Seymour's idea is not a new one. A Labor cabinet 30 years ago debated whether that should happen, and perhaps we should have. I'm not sure. My own view about that is that I'm not in favour of the tribunal inventing principles. I'm not in favour of David Seymour either, even though I like his set. I'm in favour of the original treaty, which it seems to me is quite clear, and I'm quite happy to live with it.
I just so admire you for that, because you and I think the same, Richard. I'm saying it's clear.
Do you find, by the way, this is an aside, do you find that the people who agree with you think they're rather intelligent?
Oh, they're geniuses, and all those who don't agree with me are thick as a plank. So, or they're an activist. Anyway, I want to keep asking you questions because this is so good for me. If you were the Prime Minister, I think Kiwis are really they're pissed off that this gravy train's been going on and on and on and on. It's now 50 years grinding on, and it started even before that with compensation for this tribe and that tribe. And as you say, some of them have been paid 2 or 3 times, and they keep coming back for more. If you were the Prime Minister, what would you do to fix this once and for all and say enough's enough? And you finish your article by saying...
One treaty,
one country, one citizenship. Now, if you were the Prime Minister, come on, don't say you're too old to think about it now, because you're still sharp as a razor. It's great. So what would you do?
That's exactly the advice. And
but what would you do to fix it, Richard? What would you actually do? Would you just... If you had the power and you didn't have to work with the Greens or Te Pāti Maori or anybody else, and you had the power to pass a bill to sort this out once and for all, what would you do?
Okay, well, first you've got to set the principles, and to say that...
you would set some principles.
Hang on, make the statement, because saying there's one treaty, one country, one citizenship. Basically, David Longy said that when he was Prime Minister. I remember when they put this up, and David Longy's got a famous quote saying that he didn't accept Queen Victoria agreed to a treaty to be in partnership with 600
thumbprints,
600 natives. He said that defies credibility.
So here's the David Longy quote that he's talking about. David Longy said, "Did Queen Victoria for a moment think of forming a partnership with a number of signatures, a number of thumbprints and 500 people? Queen Victoria was not that sort of person. We can have a democratic form of government, or we can have Indigenous sovereignty. They can't coexist, and we can't have them both." And there's the reference. See, it was so clear. And yet we're so far away from that now as a country. We've drifted miles and miles from that. We're drifting towards Indigenous sovereignty and trying to meld the two together with democratic form of government. Well, democracy's gone and Indigenous sovereignty is in. And that's what's happening. It's a disaster.
And I mean, all the Prime Minister needs to do is to do that. What he's actually doing is, I think that the issue scares him, and I understand that, because the moment you touch that, it's the third rail. I've had an enormous amount of abuse in the last 24 hours from various people I've never met.
Yep.
And when you speak, and no doubt you have too from your blog, but he's the Prime Minister, he's got to lead. And I then sit down and say, well, okay, how are we going to sort this so that instead of the tribunal being a source of grievance, it's a source of solving the matter? I believe that it was wrong that all the judges are Maori Land Court judges. And that's not to criticise them. I mean, Maori Land Court judges do a very good job at sorting out iwi and hapu disputes. Might come as a surprise to you, but about a third or maybe half of the tribunal's work is actually sorting out counterclaims between iwi and hapu, and some of that comes from the Musket Wars, where large numbers of Maori were displaced just prior to 1840. And now, which property right counts? Was it the one prior to 1840, the one after the Musket Wars? Very difficult to sort out, and a Maori Land Court judge is probably the best person to do that. But they've now become a constitutional court, so they're not answerable to the courts, certainly don't answer to Parliament, and they don't answer to their previous rulings.
Right.
So they're saying that at any time they can announce a completely new version of the treaty. That's just unsustainable.
So what Richard is saying, that inside the tribunal, there's a lot of stuff going on with the treaty, and they're simply making up what it means. The activists have already drifted far from the original meaning and intent of the treaty, using their fraudulent versions of the treaty to extract billions from the taxpayer. That's what they've done already. What Richard is saying is that they want to drift even farther away from the original meaning and intent. They want to be even more extreme. And obviously the reason for that is so that they can extract more billions in cash and assets from the taxpayer. That's what it's about. As a country, Richard says it's unsustainable. What does he mean? Well, he says we just can't let this fraud and corruption continue. Not only can we not afford it, but it's just plain wrong. That's what's going on inside that tribunal.
So I think that the tribunal needs to be reconstituted and basically draw a line in the sand. I don't know if I was the first person to do it, but I was being told that I was the first parliamentarian to do it. I got up in Parliament and said, it's time that we cut off all historic claims.
Right.
If you don't know that you've got a claim now, and the tribunal's been running at that point, the tribunal had been running for 30 years, it can't be a very good claim. Let's do a cut-off date. And I said, look, that's what the courts do. If you can't bring a claim that's historical into the courts. It depends on the nature of the claim. Some claims cut off after only 2 years, some 5, some 7. And I said, let's cut it off. I was attacked at the time. A subsequent government actually adopted that, so they cut off all historic claims. Well, I think we should stick to that.
You know what? The 2008 cut-off date for submitting claims is a joke. Here's why. The government-owned website says, quote, any Maori may make a claim to the Tribunal against the Crown. The Maori Purposes Bill 2006 introduced a cut-off date of 1st of September 2008 for submitting historical claims to the Waitangi Tribunal. This is a quote from Mark Burton. The passing of the Act represents a significant milestone which will help bring a comprehensive, final, get that, and durable resolution to all historical claims, end quote. Minister in charge of Treaty of Waitangi negotiations, Mark Burton, said. What a joke. This will assist the government's target of resolving all historical claims by 2020. Again, what a joke. We just heard Tama Potaka say there's 10,000 claims in the pipeline.
And then I should think we should say, hey, you can't bring future claims if it doesn't actually fit these things, and actually instruct the tribunal what they could do. I mean, I was put on to a hearing. When I read the claims, I was incredulous. The claimants were basically saying that the treaty says that governments will provide social welfare and that social welfare will be sufficient so that people will end up being economically equal.
So here's another great point that Richard Prebble brings up here, and it's the issue of being economically equal. The idea that all Kiwis should be economically equal is, as Richard says, impossible to achieve. What's all this about? Maori is saying inside the tribunal that all Maori should have the same economic outcomes as everyone else in life. So Maori want the same car, house, holidays, bank account, etc. as other wealthy citizens just by virtue of their ethnicity. It's saying we want what everyone else has got, but we don't want to have to work for those outcomes. The social welfare will pay. Worse still, the tribunal believes this is what is mandated in the treaty. This is insane. Truly, this is insanity manifested itself. Please be sure to read my paper in the description of this video. It's called What is the Solution for Maori? In this paper, I cover the issue of this absurd Maori demand to be economically equal with everybody else. So please be sure to read that.
That's actually impossible.
Yes, I know.
You could have a Maori Party government and every MP is a Maori Party MP. They still couldn't make everyone economically equal. I mean, the communists went and killed millions of people trying to do it and proved that it can't be done. It's just inherent in humans. We're all different. You can give equal opportunities to people, but you can't give equal outcomes.
No, I agree with you. We're on the same page, Richard.
Well, we give free education to everyone, and apparently in some schools, 50% of the pupils don't turn up. Very hard to pass if you don't actually go to school.
Right.
That's right. And the idea that means you've got a treaty claim, to me is, well, I just wasn't prepared to spend 3 years listening to people arguing that. I mean, the tribunal doesn't have to take every case. There are hundreds of cases that they've decided have no merit. You know, there are cases that the dog licenses are contrary to the treaty. There's all sorts of, no, seriously, there are quite a few cases about dog licenses being contrary to the treaty, and the tribunal just hasn't taken them up. So they just sit there unlooked at. But the tribunal's decided to take up that social welfare is a guarantee under the treaty, which means that the tribunal judges or whoever decided to do that have already decided that there's merit. And of course, if you look at the way they have ruled citizenship to mean that we're all going to be, I say, equal, and then they're right. We're going to have, I mean, we've seen nothing to what the grievance claims are that are coming. And they'll go on forever. And I say, I don't care whether you have a Maori Party government.
You know what? This has got to be the definition of insanity. What the tribunal is saying is that any Maori who is not economically equal with the white man next door or down the road or wherever can file a Waitangi tribunal grievance claim. He or she can say that the Crown has breached the treaty because they, the Maori person, is living an economically inferior life to someone else. You know what? Richard's not making this up. He's been inside the tribunal. He knows what's going on there, and he's really recent. He's not 10 years ago or 5 years ago. He's just last week.
They can't possibly deliver on what they are now saying the treaty is.
So if you were Luxon, I'm not clear about what you would do if you were.
I wouldn't duck the issue. I'd say what I think. I mean, one of the arguments made about Mr. Lux, and I just saw an article again this morning. Don't know what he stands for. I'm still not totally sure. This is a major issue. He may wish it was going to go away, but when you're Prime Minister, you don't have that option. So I think he should get up and tackle it. And frankly, put the issues into the electorate. Previous Prime Ministers have been prepared to do that. I mean, heck, Helen Clark was prepared to put a bill in Parliament saying that she didn't accept that the Crown didn't own the coastline. Now, I'm not going to go into whether she's right or wrong. What I'm saying is, hey,
she had a position.
Prime Ministers have been prepared to grasp the metal. You should be as well.
Would you support a referendum on the treaty?
I'm not that much in favour of that. You see, because I don't support rewriting the treaty. So I don't support the Tribunal doing it. And as I've said to David Seymour, those are a wonderful set of principles you've got there, David, but they weren't the principles that Governor Hobson and the chiefs agreed on. The ones they agreed on was sovereignty, property rights, citizenship.
So this is my understanding of Richard Prebble's understanding of the treaty. That column says what it summarised, what it says summarised, and this column says what it means. Well, the preamble of the treaty, what it says summarised, the British agreed to set up a government for Maori and non-Maori. What it means, the chiefs in 1840 gave the British the right to govern all New Zealanders. Article 1, what does that say summarised? Maori ceded sovereignty. What does it mean? Maori gave up the right to govern the country completely and forever. Article 2, Sentence 1, the British promised to protect the chiefs, the tribes and all the people in New Zealand in the ownership of their land, dwellings and property for as long as they owned them. What does that mean? All New Zealanders would have property rights and security, the same as everybody else. Article 2, Sentence 2, the British would buy land from the chiefs. What does that mean? Well, it means the chiefs would sell their land exclusively to the British Crown. Article 3, Maori became British citizens, thus equal before the law with all other citizens. What does that mean? That all New Zealanders are equal under the law with the same rights and duties. And the affirmation, the final part of the treaty, the chiefs understood and agreed to all they were signing up to. What does that mean? Well, it just means that the chiefs understood and agreed all they were signing up to. And so Richard Prebble says the three sort of cornerstones of the treaty, the absolutely not negotiables are sovereignty, property rights and citizenship. And there they are. That's the Treaty of Waitangi according to Richard Prebble. And man, is he absolutely 100% correct about that.
And we should just stick to that. And those other principles that you put up, I think should be in a Bill of Rights. Should a Bill of Rights be put to a referendum? It may be. The treaty is actually a fact.
So Richard says the treaty is a fact. Well, what does he mean by that? This is another great one-liner from Richard. His interpretation of it is a fact, that is of the treaty. What does he mean? He has come to his understanding after extensive study of eyewitness accounts of people alive in 1840, and after studying carefully the intent of both parties to the treaty, that is, the chiefs and the British. His conclusion is that the treaty's meaning is able to be known. Not just known, but it's simple, clear, and unambiguous. This is precisely why, says Richard, we don't need principles. We just need Luxon to step up and say what the treaty means and stick to it. This would bring about the end of the need for any principles. The final English draft of the treaty is the absolute key to this result because it tells us clearly what the Maori version says and means. The final English draft makes the meaning of the treaty incontrovertible. Now go and have a look at that word in the dictionary and you'll understand exactly what I mean.
So even if a majority of people vote yes or no, they can't change the facts any more than the historians can, any more than the Tribunal can, even any more than David Seymour can. And it's about time we had a leader who said that.
Washing this up, clearing this up, do you think that if this is not sorted, we're going to have a civil war?
No. What you got to remember is while it seems like a lot of people in the street, it was still only a few hundred. The vast majority of New Zealanders are going about their business. What I fear is that young people look at this, look at the complete failure of leadership, not just on this issue, but a whole lot of others, and decide, I've had a gutsful, and they're off to Aussie. And we and that's what's actually happening. We're having a referendum at Auckland Airport every day.
I just want to talk about this issue of civil war for a moment. I agree with Richard that there is a referendum happening every day at Auckland Airport. Nobody would deny that. But I cannot agree that it's only a few hundred people who are massively concerned about this issue. How do we know this? Well, if you combined all the people who have signed up to Stop Co-Governance, Hobson's Pledge, New Zealand Centre for Political Research, Democracy Action, Taxpayers Union, Groundswell, the Free Speech Union, Family First, and the Platform radio station and other groups, it would be safe to say that there are hundreds of thousands of very concerned Kiwis out there about all this. Now, if you combine this with a hikoi with 40,000 radicalised Maori and the continued radicalisation of Maori by the Maori Party and others, and the dissemination of false information by the media, and a Prime Minister who is showing zero leadership, then there is definitely a recipe brewing for conflict beyond computer keyboards. See that? We've sort of got a cocktail brewing here that's very, very unhealthy, and anything could happen. Well, that's my take on the issue. What's yours? Leave a comment on the comments section of this video. So what do you think New Zealanders can do to effect change, to get this sorted once and for all? What if the Prime Minister doesn't sort it, what can New Zealanders do to effect change, to get this sorted?
That's a good question, and I appreciate it. I mean, here's an interesting thought for you. My columns on the Herald, I'm just giving you as a fact rather than boasting, attract the most comments of any columnist that they've got. So some weeks I get more comments than all the other columnists put together. So I can have 400 people commenting. Interestingly enough, on that article about the treaty, I've had more emails about it than probably any other article I've written this year. But the Herald's only posted 54 comments. Now, there's one or two explanations. The Herald doesn't post every comment, and maybe a large number were too vile to print. But the other one is that New Zealanders just know that it's that this is the third rail. There are very few people as courageous as you to run a blog on this subject. Most other New Zealanders act very like our Prime Minister and hope if they say nothing, it'll go away.
You know, that's another great statement from Richard. Most New Zealanders are hoping if they say nothing, it will go away. Well, I think most New Zealanders are like this. I agree with Richard. They're simply hoping that it will go away. But you know what? It's not going to go away. This has been brewing for 50 years or more, and like a cyclone far out at sea and heading our way, it's intensifying. This cyclone, if you will, is not breaking up and it's not dissipating. As I said, it's intensifying. It's getting worse. Of all the times in our history, this is the time to not spectate and cross fingers. No, don't do that. This is the time to rise up and fight. It's a time to not be like Luxon, a passive observer. I'm telling you, we need to actually get going and mobilise to actually push back against all this. Right? Do you think that the Herald might be censoring your comments? The comments coming in on your article?
It does anyway. It does anyway. No,
yes,
it's quite open about it. It's quite that the Herald's quite open that the comments that are posted to any article are read beforehand, and they have to because they're the ones who have to pay for the defamation case.
Right.
And for all I know, most of the comments that were made were defamatory. And they're probably protecting me. I mean, given the vile statements that have been printed, I suspect the ones that weren't were off the chart.
Yeah, so they're protecting you. Hey, if Luxon gets rolled...
Hey, in fairness to the Herald, they do a very good job of proofreading my articles. One reason I write for them.
Okay, very good. I love your columns, and the reason that this column was so attractive to me was it was so simple, and you were so clear, and it was in no way it was murky or fuzzy. It was absolutely clear, and I was just clapping all the way through the house, thinking, thank goodness Richard said this, and because of all your experience in Parliament and everything, it's been great. So, if Luxon got rolled, say there's a coup. Do you have anybody in mind who could take his place inside the National Party?
Oh, no. I'm trying to retire. That's what I'm still going to write the article. I'm not trying to make statements saying that the Prime Minister should be rolled. I just think from his background and everything else, and for all sorts of reasons which I understand, he thinks that going into here will be misunderstood. It would be. I mean, he'll be vilified if he was to make a statement on the matter. But I hope he's right. Maybe this will all blow over, but I don't see any sign of that. I think it sends out a terrible message to people that the reason that you're not doing well is because the government's let you down. If you want to be successful, you've got to start with yourself. And that applies, I don't care what race you are.
Good one, Richard. Thank you so much for this morning. We'll leave it there, and that is so valuable what you've done. And thank you for your time.
Well, mate, I'm happy to do it, and I hope you've got some way of monitoring comments.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard. Thanks for coming on. See you.
Pleasure.
Okay, guys, that's enough for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Now we need your help with something. This is important. We have produced some great flyers and brochures which we want to get into the hands of all New Zealanders. So we need to go around the mainstream media. They're not going to help. In fact, they're making things a lot worse. So we have to go around them. And we need your help to make this happen. We can't do this without you. So what are we talking about? First, there is our business cards. They're only 3 cents each plus courier to get them to you. Then there is our latest booklet called The Psychology of Takeover, 19 strategies Maori activists are using to take over the country. It's 80 pages and packs a huge punch. So they're cheap, they're $3, and they're absolutely fantastic if you want to get a handle on what's actually happening in New Zealand. Then we have a few thousand of our original Stop Co-Governance booklets left over from my tour in 2023. Remember these? You'll remember we printed 550,000 of these. Well, these are now free because we realized that only about 1/3 of New Zealand houses got this booklet last when I did my tour, and so we want to get to the other 2/3. So if you do a few streets around where you live, that would be absolutely phenomenal, and they are free now. Then we have our MACA, that's Marine and Coastal Act brochure 2, which alert people to the loss of our beaches. You know, we're in danger of losing all the beaches around New Zealand. The text is written by Graham Adams, who's a great author. These are now free. And then we have our beautiful bumper sticker, which we've just made. And why are we doing this? Well, New Zealand's identity is under threat. We know that. First activists have and are still trying to change the name of New Zealand to Aotearoa. We don't want that. We must oppose this. This is rubbish. Where's the referendum saying that we want to change the name of the country? There was none. It was just forced on us. Second, Maori sovereignty flags are appearing more and more all over the place, and they're just treason. So we've got to get these bumper stickers out. So we've printed some awesome bumper stickers. They're $3 each, and they measure 21.5 by 6.5, so you can see how big that would be on your car. To get any of these free products, all you need to do is pay for the courier to get them to you. For the products that cost something, like the bumper stickers or the little psychology booklet, it's the cost plus the courier to get them to you. So to order any of these products, just use this email address, cards@stopcogovernance.kiwi, and we'd love to hear from you. Finally, if you want to access all the videos we've ever made, including all our most viewed and most popular videos, and have them all in one place, which is what people are asking for, then just type in this address into your browser. There it is there, https www.youtube.com/@stopcogovernance, and you'll find it goes straight to our channel. Then what you do is save this address to your computer as a favorite. Job done. Well done. Then you've got them all in one place forever. And all the new ones that are coming in get placed into that address, so you won't miss anything. Okay, last thing, please, oh please, don't forget to subscribe. When you subscribe, you'll get the latest videos straight into your inbox. You'll never miss a video, which is great. You'll link up with like-minded people all over New Zealand, and that's very, very stimulating to have meet up with all these people who think like you. You'll be telling YouTube, I like these videos, and they will respond by advertising our videos to more Kiwis for free. It's incredible what they do, but it just relies on you replying to comments and making comments and liking things and sharing things and activity. That's what it is. It's just activity on our channel. And turning New Zealand around is simply a matter of reaching more Kiwis with the truth. So just click on the subscribe button on the bottom right hand side of your screen. There, the little yellow arrow is showing you where it is, and you'll be subscribed. Okay. See you next time. You guys are awesome.